Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me tonight on this beautiful June evening for our last webinar of the 2023 to 2024 series. Excited to spend a little time talking with you all tonight about sparking kids' connection to nature with fun hands-on activities. I do want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, so don't worry about taking a bunch of notes or copying down a bunch of links. I will be sending out the recording to you with all of the links that we mentioned in a follow-up email. And I'm guessing we're all feeling pretty confident with Zoom these days, but just in case Zoom is not your preferred platform, I do want to go over a couple of things. When I shared my screen, it probably went full screen for you. I do recommend that you actually exit full screen. You can do this by selecting the view options at the top of your screen, or sometimes just hitting the escape button will do it for you too. The reason I recommend you do this is it will allow you to dock the chat window to the side of your screen, and we will have a few opportunities to have a little discussion going on in there. To open the chat window, look for the speech bubble icon that says chat. And then the other thing I want you to check is to make sure that you're sending to everyone right over here above where you type. And that will just allow you to see each other's responses. If you have any links to resources that you want to share, that way other people can see them as well. All right, let's dive in. So we are coming to you from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. My name is Kelly Schaefer, and I am with the K-12 education team, and I am joined today by Susan Licker, our learning coordinator. She'll be in the chat window helping to answer and field questions and share links with you all as well. And here on the K-12 education team, our mission is to create innovative resources and deliver transformative trainings that empower educators to build young people's science skills through birds, nature, participatory science, and inquiry. Everything that we do sort of falls along this spectrum here. We have these three main pillars of focus that our resources and trainings fall on. So nature connection, participatory science, and inquiry investigations. And today we're going to be focusing more on the two first pillars. We're going to be talking about ways to spark that nature connection and how to deepen it with participatory science. So I'll be sharing a bunch of free resources with you all today. We'll talk about some apps and things as well that will help enhance that. And we're also going to really dive into a little bit about how important outdoor learning can be for our health and well-being. So I'm excited to dive into those topics with you tonight. And I'd love to start by throwing it out to you. When I think about the benefits of outdoor learning, I think about it often in terms of some experiences I've had myself. So I would love to hear from you. Can you think of a time when you've experienced benefits, whether emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever kind of benefit you want to talk about, experience a personal benefit from spending time outdoors? And just take a minute or two to think of it. You can jot it down. If you don't mind sharing, I'll ask for some examples in the chat window as well. And while you're all typing or thinking, I will share an example for myself. I recently have developed a chronic health condition that has made spending time in the outdoors more difficult. And so I actually did not do it a whole lot last year, and I felt my health kind of deteriorate in a way I didn't expect, kind of this mental and physical connection to the outdoors. So I've really been working this year at spending more times in the outdoors, and I have found it to be very grounding and very hopeful is maybe the word I'm looking for. There's especially this time of year where everything is growing, and in spring when the birds were coming back, I felt so much more grounded and centered and able to deal with the challenges that I had just because I was putting in this time and effort to be outdoors. And it can be challenging when we're going through difficult times to let ourselves spend that time that we need to help ourselves, gear up for the challenges ahead. So that's a personal note I'm taking, is it's worth the time and effort to do that. I'm seeing some thoughts coming into the chat window. Forest bathing, yes, so spending time outside and being mindful is very stress relieving. My best ideas come when I'm outdoors, says Terry. Yes, absolutely. Mental health, memories with friends and families, physical health, family and comfort, and grand adventures. Love it. Chris is mentioning developing a closer connection with his kid. That's awesome. Laura is mentioning that a long, hard day at work is made better when I do just 15 minutes of tidying up my yard or refilling my bird feeders when I get home. Yes. I'm seeing also just some personal moments of beauty out in the outdoors coming up too, and things we like to do like journaling and drawing. Awesome. Thank you for sharing these little stories and how you have experienced benefits from being outdoors. I saw some common threads of ideas of relaxation, of slowing down, moments of joy and connection, and recharging kind of coming up a lot. And that really actually jives incredibly well with the research into what some of the benefits of being outside in learning environments are as well. We see some of those, oops, hang on, we jumped twice. There we go. We see some similar benefits. We see, for example, increased enthusiasm for learning. We see greater engagement with learning when you have an opportunity to learn outdoors. We also see improved behavior in terms of more impulse control and less disruptive behavior. So having time outdoors allows us to increase our focus and attention, and can even enhance our academic performance. So these two infographics that we're looking at here are from the Children and Nature Network, Children and Nature Network. And they are really useful. Susan just shared a link to the Children and Nature Network in the chat window. And I'm wondering, when you've worked with youth, have you seen any of these any of these benefits with youth? So we talked a little bit academic performance. We're talking better behavior, increased attention, increased enthusiasm, but we also see improved grades. We see increased self-esteem. We see all of these positive youth development aspects as well. We even see stronger emotional connections between people and nature, which is something that really does interest me as an environmental educator. We see more care for the environment. And this always brings to mind for me a quote from David Sobel that says, "What is important is that children have an opportunity to bond with the natural world, to learn to love it and to feel comfortable in it, before being asked to heal its wounds. And so by incorporating time outdoors into our learning environments, we really provide this opportunity for youth to develop a connection and a love for nature that helps them build their skills, helps them build self-esteem, and helps them develop a connection to nature that can lead to pro-environmental behaviors in the future. But along the lines of this kind of emotional piece we've talked about, a stronger emotional connection, we also see some really positive social emotional learning benefits. So this is another infographic snippet from the Children in Nature Network on the left here. We see increased relationship skills as well as self-awareness and self-management. We see a reduction in aggression and discipline problems in green schoolyards. We see that gardening at school can help students feel a sense of pride, help them feel responsible and more confident. We also see that children are really building skills around communication and relationships. So they're learning how to cooperate through play. They're making positive social relationships and learning about civil behavior in this setting. And this other graphic here, the CASEL 5 core competencies, is from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And they've put together a really great framework for social emotional learning. If you are interested, Susan's going to share a link in the chat window to them. So if you want to learn more about social emotional learning, we're not going to go too in depth into it today, but I did want to highlight this kind of self-awareness and management piece and the relationship skills part, because I think that is something that we will really see come into play when we have outdoor learning environments, especially if we include collaborative activities. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So we can really help our students develop the skills they need to learn how to listen, how to manage emotions, how to make decisions, how to get along with others, all while having these really positive benefits for their academics and their behavior as well. So it's just a really wonderful way to help build a whole person. And it's really an equity and justice issue too. So this quote is from a really great article titled "The Urgent Need for Nature During and After COVID-19." And the article argues that equity and access to green space can actually help combat health inequities. And this quote says that studies show that nature's benefits are relatively greater for those who are negatively impacted by economic disadvantage, systemic racism, trauma, opportunity gaps, and other challenges. So just spending time in the outdoors can really have an equalizing effect, or at least help close some of these gaps. And there, yes, we can send the link to the article as well. That's the Liebert T. Pub link, Susan. Okay. So I'm guessing if you're here, you probably didn't need a whole lot of preaching to about why it's great to teach in the outdoors, but I've always found that it's great for me personally to refresh those thoughts and ideas and get me really excited about it again. Also, if you ever need to convince some admin folks or help your team get excited about it, these can be really great resources that can help you. Now I want to dive into some of the resources that we have available to get you outside and having fun. So we're going to focus right now on some free resources. I've pulled out a few downloads and activity ideas to share with you. We have so much more, but I'm just going to highlight a few for you. One of my favorite for summertime and for some easy outdoor exploration is our Explorer's Guidebook. This was originally created in conjunction with the Every Kid in a Park initiative, which some of you might be familiar with from the Obama administration. There was an initiative to get every fourth grader free access to public lands. So we created this as kind of an idea to complement that exploration, but it is something that you can do in your backyard, in a schoolyard, at a community center, at a local park. And it just kind of provides you with some framework for exploring your local area. It's available as a free download from our website. And it's written at a fourth grade level, but you can absolutely do it independently with folks who are reading at fourth grade or above, or you can do this as a guided activity. I've done it both ways and had some great fun with it. It has 6 different activities in it, some of which I'll just highlight for you now. One of my very favorites is the opening activity. It's a sound map. This is just a great way to turn your brain on and tune in to nature and start observing. I think sound is one of those skills, or excuse me, senses that we use all the time, but we don't always tune into in a really intentional way. And this helps our kids do that. So the idea is that you have in the guidebook, you've got a piece of paper with some instructions and an X in the center, and the center marks your location. And then around you, you draw using words or symbols or drawings the different sounds that you're hearing, and you try and do not just direction, but distance as well. And you can tune into some really wild things that you might not have realized you could hear before. I remember one student, a younger student, doing this activity, and they heard a chipmunk run across the ground, and they had never realized that you could hear their little footsteps before. I've also done this with high school age kids. Up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, and it was during one of their very first snowfalls that a student from Texas had ever experienced, and he realized he could hear the snow landing on his hood. So it's just a really fun way to tune into an experience you might not always tune into. And for those of us who are interested in birds, it's a really great skill builder because we know that bird song can be a great way to identify birds. So we're building up a skill there that can come into play later in some of our participatory science opportunities that we'll talk about as well. We also have just your classic habitat scavenger hunt. Gets you out there exploring and looking for the different components of a habitat. We do go over the components of the habitat in the guide as well. And then ultimately we start working towards some skills that you would need to identify birds. So we talk, oh, sorry, I didn't realize that was going to be quite so blurry. We work on identifying bird groups. So if you have started your own personal bird identification journey, you might be aware that size and shape is one of the key clues to bird ID, and even experts say it's the first thing that you should pay attention to, even over color, because size and shape can help us identify a bird to a particular group, which then makes identification a lot easier. So if you saw a bird with medium length legs and a long neck and webbed feet, you might think, okay, we're going geese and ducks, and you can rule out a bunch of other things that might take your attention away or turns that whole, 200-page bird guide into something much more manageable. And so it really does use Merlin, which if you've used our Merlin app, it uses that kind of the inspiration as how to talk about bird ID. So it also talks about some different steps that you would use in that app, and I'll go into that app later. But it can be a great introduction if you're planning on using that app in the future. Another great Oh, thanks for the updated link for the article, Susan. So another free resource we have that is a great one to pull from if you're looking for ideas for engaging with the outdoors is Feathered Friends. This is a free download. It has 10 monthly lessons. It's meant to be kind of a monthly check-in with birds during the school year, but it has a lot of activities that do not need to be done in the classroom. They can be done in non-formal settings. They have indoor and outdoor components. Each month introduces you to a group of birds, some local birds. We might not, for example, you can see in this image that we talk about chickadees, finches, and woodpeckers. So we don't go specifically into which type of chickadee, right? Because we wanted this to be applicable across the country, and chickadees there's lots of them. But it's a great way to start introducing to types of birds that are out there. And it's got some great themes in it, including bird diversity, habitat, flight and migration, conservation, and citizen or participatory science. And each lesson is aligned with the NGSS standards and also has a take-home component. So there's something that you can hand out to students or youth to have them do at home as well. This one, this purple one here is what's in a habitat, has you do a habitat map of a nearby outdoor space, which can be a great way to drive in those components of habitat, but also a great way to get kids thinking about what's going on in their own yard, their own local park, what kind of things are around for their local bird communities. This is a K-5 resource. Another set of resources that are free that have great activities that you can draw from are our book guides for educators. So we have some free educators guides that associate with children's books to encourage reading, writing, art, and science skills, all while getting kids outdoor and exploring on topics related to the books. So for example, one of my favorite books that we have is this really whimsically written On Bird Hill by Jane Yolen, and the artwork is just so sweet, and whimsical, but it has some really great connections that you can make to actual science learning. So there's just a little sample of the writing here. And on that twig, I saw a nest, and in that nest, a bird at rest. Beneath that bird, there was an egg, a little chick, all beak, wing, leg. And the artwork has the eggshell in a later sequence where it's broken open, and the inside of the eggshell looks like a painting of a home on a hill. And so it's a great way to tie in some content. And so each activity guide is standards aligned with both Common Core and NGSS and has some really fantastic activities. And I want to zoom in for a moment on this Build a Nest activity because it is one of my favorites, and it's such a great activity for this time of year when birds are out there doing their thing, raising their young. I can actually hear right now, I have my windows open, and I can hear my house wren babies fussing so loudly. So great time to be thinking about nesting, and something that the youth you're working with will be noticing as well. So this activity is a super fun one. It's a great way to bring in some art and some science, and you can frame it in so many different ways. So this is written for younger students. So this is written for, I want to say this activity guide is K-3. But there are adaptations you can do to make this great for older students as well. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So you can dive into the diversity of nests that are out there. So there's all different kinds of nests out there. There are scrape nests like we see in this picture here, which are just on the ground scraped away for the eggs to be laid. There's platform nests like you see with an osprey, the classic cup nest that you see with a robin, cavity nest like woodpecker. And each of these different types of nests have advantages and disadvantages with them. So for example, a cup nest is going to be a really easy type of nest to build. You have lots of locations that you can build them in, but it's pretty exposed. You have to hope that a predator doesn't find it or that you camouflaged it well enough. Whereas if you have a cavity nester bird, the cavity is really, really sheltered. It's very protected, but there's not a whole lot of great cavities out there. If you're not a woodpecker, you have to use an old cavity that a woodpecker's abandoned, or you need the right type of tree or wood, or woodpeckers love snags or dead trees, and we tend to take those out of our landscapes. So there might not be a lot of nesting locations available to you. So that is the trade-off with the cavity nester. But since it's so protected, you'll tend to have babies that are a lot louder in cavity nests. They will just scream and scream and scream because they're safe. They can do that. It's why I can hear my house wren nest from here, whereas the robin nest that's actually closer to where I'm sitting is totally silent because they're pretty out in the open on my front porch. So you can really dive into, if you want to age this activity up, you can really dive into all this other great content around types of nests. And there's all sorts of great videos. When I've done this before, I've included videos on, you can just find on YouTube or Macaulay Library, which is a site that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology runs about birds building nests too, and you can actually watch them in action. You can talk about what it takes to build a nest. So birds use a variety of nesting materials, and you can brainstorm a bunch of different examples. I'll go ahead and throw that question out to you. What are some examples you can think of materials that birds use in their nests? Yeah, branches, mud, leaves, hair, cattail fuzz, absolutely. This image here is a chickadee using some fur or hair. Saliva, yes, some birds do use saliva. Shells, sticks, lichen, feathers, sometimes trash. Yes. Yeah, I used to work with wood thrush and they loved old, clear, whitish plastic. Because they often use birch leaves in their nests, and if it mimics that, they were into it. I don't know why, but I've seen so many catbirds use blue plastic. I'm not sure what it is about that. But yeah, spider webs is another great one. Absolutely. So birds use incredibly diverse materials when they build their nests. And it's great to brainstorm these before you go out and challenge your students to make their own nest as well. So I'm seeing a lot of people have stories about different ways they've seen birds gather fur. I've seen chickadees take fur from coyote scat before. Birds are very resourceful, that's for sure. All right, so now we know some of our materials. Let's talk about how you could take this activity a little further. So obviously in the building a nest activity, the heart is going to be building the nest. Now we know what are some shapes of nests. We know what are some materials that birds might use. And now we can challenge our kids to go and make their own nest using materials that you find in nature. You want to be careful with your boundaries when you're setting this activity up. Tell them, if you know there's poison ivy, choose a different location. Only have them use objects that are already on the ground. For example, not picking things, that sort of thing can be a great boundary to have out there as well. And then for us as educators, we talked about social emotional learning a little bit and some of these benefits. Kind of wanted us to think about, oh geez, sorry. Keep hitting a double click on accident. Let's think about a building a nest scenario. So we're running this activity. We've assigned our kids to work in groups of 3 to 4 and to work together to build a nest. And their challenge is to use similar materials to what a bird would use. And they want their nest to be able to hold 2 to 3 eggs, which we'll say is small rocks. You can up the difficulty level for older students and say it has to have those rocks plus like a windstorm. So I want you to imagine this activity and imagine these students working in these groups and think about what sort of skills, it doesn't have to be specifically social emotional learning skills, but positive youth development, right? So it doesn't just have to be science content skills, but what kind of skills might they be using to work together in this group? And how could you frame the exercise to bring those skills out? Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of collaboration. They're going to have to talk through their ideas. There might be some problem solving if they have different ideas about what direction to go in. Compromising. Yep, it can be a hard one. Taking turns, listening to other ideas and learning how to make a group decision. I like the idea of having different jobs for each person. Self-assignment, yes. Yeah, I like this idea of Betsy saying that some students might like to draw or construct while others might like to talk it out. That could be a fun way to add some designing into this, is have them sketch out their ideas before they actually start building or gathering their materials. Yeah. Are there any ways that you might frame this activity to specifically bring out some of these skills, these kind of, I guess we could call them soft skills? Angie's bringing up empathy for the birds and how much time it takes them to build a nest. I love that. Yeah. Jennifer is saying she would use some clear expectations. Mm-hmm. That is one of the things I love about this activity is it can bring home how time consuming it can be for a bird to build a nest. Um, we have the benefit of opposable thumbs, and birds are using their beaks and their bodies to make their nests. One of the challenges you can do to level this up is have your students kind of tape the 4 fingers together, or just ask them to hold their 4 fingers together so their hands are shaped kind of like a beak, and try to build a nest using that as well. Kate's suggesting framing it as a STEM challenge. I love that. Yeah, so the build a nest activity is one of those activities I love because there are so many different ways you could approach it. There's the way that we have it written out in the On Bird Hill book guide that I mentioned. That is, brainstorming when you've seen nests before, brainstorming what material you've noticed, or you can go this more in-depth route where maybe you're having students research different type of bird for older students, or you're framing it as a STEM challenge. So there's so many different ways that you can tweak these activity ideas into what you need them to be. And so with that in mind, I want to share with you another resource we have out there that has a lot of great just activity ideas that can spark some of these greater learning moments, and depending on how you choose to frame the activity. So we have our quests. So on our website, these are created to complement our science and nature activities for Cooped Up Kids, which is an online resource that has both indoor and outdoor activities through K-8 learners. But these quests are more like bite-sized activity ideas, little challenges that you can do in families or you can do as an educator. And they're just little ideas, 1 or 2 sentences long, that we throw out there that you can adapt to your learning environment. You can do what we did with the building a nest activity and choose how you're going to frame it and what skills you want to really bring out with it. But there's more than 50 ideas for outdoor and indoor quests. The outdoor ones, the indoor ones build on a lot of the lab resources, like our Wall of Birds, which is a beautiful mural that has an interactive, or the Right Bird, Right House interactive from Nest Watch. So taps into a bunch of lab resources, whereas the outdoor ones are similar to, actually there's the Build a Nest is in there, but there's a lot of different activities out there. You could build a nest that fits your entire family with natural materials, or if you're inside, you can do it with blankets and pillows. Things like going on a bird behavior walk in your local neighborhood or park, looking for birds foraging, preening, moving in a flock, or hiding from predators. Designing a feeder is an idea that we have, something can you make your own feeder that you can hang outside from materials that you have at home. We also have a free Spark guide that goes really into depth into that activity as well. So lots of just inspiration for you if you're looking for ideas, and definitely worth checking out. All right, now I want to take some time to talk about participatory science. So first we'll chat a little bit about what participatory science is, and then we'll look at some apps that can help us join a couple projects. And I've just got a couple apps that we will talk about, but there's lots and lots of opportunity to engage in participatory science. So I'm going to throw this out to you. What is participatory science? You might be used to hearing it referred to as citizen science. I believe Audubon uses the term community science. So feel free to share if you have a definition, a keyword, some projects that come to mind when you hear participatory science. eBird, yeah, that's one of them. I'm a little biased. I eBird every day. Taking part and getting down and dirty. I love it. Yes. iNaturalist is another great one. Volunteer projects that use science, absolutely. Everyday people contributing to science data that scientists utilize. I love it. Another project being Project Feeder Watch. That's a great one. That's a November to April project where you can watch birds at your feeders. All parties fully engaged with each other and with nature. I love it. Yeah, so participatory science, we've recently made this switch to using that terminology over citizen science. There has been a conversation going on in the community of practitioners about the language that we're using to refer to these sorts of projects. And we've made a shift towards participatory science to be more inclusive, because citizen can be a very fraught term. So you might be seeing in resources coming out from us a shift towards that language. So just a heads up for you. Participatory science is what you guys are getting at. Absolutely. It is this idea that people can report their observations using basic scientific protocols. And what's great about these projects is they can be totally online or totally outside. They can be on the scale of the universe, looking at galaxies and star images, to the microscopic, or a global project to a hyperlocal project, and everything in between. And we really do at the Lab of Ornithology view them as partnerships. Regular folks like you and me and our students who aren't professional scientists volunteer to work with scientists by collecting data that they share with databases that help these scientists answer real world questions. So that real world part is a really big part of it, because these data that we're sharing are really being used by scientists to help understand the natural world around us. And I'm just going to feature 2 projects today, but in case you are looking for more information or you're looking for projects on specific topics, I recommend these 2 organizations. There's the Association for Advancing Participatory Sciences. It's a recent name change, so I'm still working on getting that in my brain. At participatorysciences.org. They kind of have all the great background about participatory science. And then there's SciStarter.org, which is a great place to look up participatory science projects. You can search them by the age of the students that you'll be working with, whether you want them online or outside, or if there's a particular specific topic that you are interested in. So SciStarter.org is a great place to look up projects. And whenever I talk about participatory science, I do have to take a moment and share this image. What do you all feel like we're looking at here in the context of citizen science or participatory science? It looks a lot like light pollution, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Night sky. Looks like it. It's not, but it looks like it. So in the context of participatory science, this is a map of submissions to the eBird database. Every point of light that you see on this map is a submission to the eBird database. There's not really an underlying continental map here. The fact that we can see this much of the shape of our world means there's that many people out there who care about birds and who are sharing their observations with the eBird database. What that looks like by the numbers is there are over 1.7 billion observations submitted to the eBird database on more than 125 million checklists by 994,000 participants, recording 10,825 species of birds, which is more than 98% of all of the bird species in the entire world. So if you think about what it would take a scientist or a group of scientists to recreate a database like this in their lifetime, it's just not possible. Data like this is only possible through participatory science, because participatory science is people-powered science. And the longer I look at this map, the more enchanted I get. You can see shipping lines out to Hawaii, to Antarctica. It's just, you can see roads as well. It's just pretty amazing. And so this can be really powerful for us as educators, because we're answering that big why question. Why are we doing this? Well, because the data that you're collecting really matter. They really go into databases that scientists use. It's a really exciting real world opportunity to get to know your local habitat, get excited about birds. It helps birds. And it does all of this while helping our kids connect to their local environments and helping us as educators meet our science and learning standards. So let's talk about a couple different ways that we can engage with participatory science. We have a blog, Apps for Outdoor Exploration. Susan, when I put together the list of links for you, I realized that it was incredibly deficient. So we'll find this link and share it with you. Apps for Outdoor Exploration has a guide. It's a blog which covers apps for exploring birds, plants and animals, weather, and soil. And I'm going to focus on two of those projects today. We're going to talk about eBird and iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is a really fantastic project that looks at all types, all types of flora and fauna. So any living thing that you see, you can document on iNaturalist: fungus, lichen, birds, mammals, insects, plants. I am not great at identifying plants. I struggle with that, and I've had many people make fun of me because I'm good at identifying birds, and plants stay still. So you would think I would be able to figure them out, but they're difficult for me. But iNaturalist makes identifying plants and sharing my observations really easy. And what's great about it is I don't have to know the full identification of what I'm looking at because there's a community of people which can help you. So let's talk about it. How to participate in iNaturalist is you record your observations, taking a photo. If you are able to use data services on whatever smart device you're using, it'll grab the GPS location for you too, which is great. You share that observation to iNaturalist, then other fellow naturalists can hang out and see what's been seen around them and confirm your ID. Or say you saw a plant and you knew it was a type of rose, but you didn't know what kind. You could say that you knew it was that particular group of plants, and then somebody else might be able to come along and say, oh, this is that species. So it gets your observation all the way through to being like a confirmed ID, relying on the expertise of your community, which is really cool. And it helps you keep track of your finding. It helps you crowdsource identifications, and it also helps you learn about the plants that you're seeing or the animals that you're seeing. And these days, it helps you identify with computer visioning, which is so fantastic. I will, if we'll have time, I'll show some sightings that I've had recently and talk about how that computer visioning works. So let's take 1 second here. We're going to try and get to the actual website. Let's go to iNaturalist. Okay, so here is my homepage for iNaturalist. We can see some activity has recently happened on my observation of common cow parsnip. So if we click on this observation here, we can see the photo that I took. And we can see that as of 3 days ago, another user has said that they agree with that identification. This has bumped my sighting up to research grade. So now that the sighting is research grade, it can be used by scientists to help track the spread of species and things like that. So I'm just going to go here to my observations, and this is really cool because it will show you everything you've seen on a map. So we can see some sightings at some different areas of the country, and you can click on them and see what they are. You can also switch to your list view, which will show you a bunch of different observations. somebody needs to confirm my prairie smoke because that was really exciting. So you can get all these fantastic IDs through crowdsourcing, but this one is one that I happen to know. But what was really cool is when I was submitting this through iNaturalist, I had taken a picture of the prairie smoke. I clicked on where it says, type what you saw, and it came up with suggestions, and prairie smoke was one of them. So I was able to just go with the suggestion that it made and have some idea of what I was looking at. And that similar thing happened here with the Solomon's plume. I did not know what this was, but it came up with 3 different suggestions, and I was able to look at those suggestions and go to the extra information and identify it from there. So it's a really powerful tool to help you identify things, and that's all just within the iNaturalist app. There's a second app that is associated with iNaturalist called Seek, which also helps you identify things. So Seek is a sister app that helps you identify what you're looking at. And let's go back to our slideshow. There we go. It's really cool. You can sort of get a feel for it here. You turn on your camera, and as you move your camera around the object that you're looking at, it will use computer visioning to identify what you're looking at. And sometimes you don't even have to take a picture before it's identified what you're seeing. From there, you can earn badges for the different things that you see. So what did I see recently? I saw some more insects, and so I leveled up in my insect badge, which was super fun for me because insects are hard to take a photo of, so I was working towards that badge. And that can be really motivating. And then once you've identified something with Seek, you can, if you link your iNaturalist account, you can post to that. I want to say that iNaturalist is not COPPA compliant. I believe you have to be 13 years or older to have an account, and that can be a great thing that Seek is for. You don't have to have an account to use Seek to identify things. So you can use Seek to identify what you're looking at and use it just to help you get to know what's around you. Or you can also use it to post to iNaturalist. So it's kind of a similar thing to what Merlin is for us. It's the ID sister to the documentation app. But iNaturalist does recently have a really good ID function built into the app, of the iNaturalist app as well. So you can get away with just iNaturalist these days, which is really wonderful. All right, now let's talk about Bird ID. I need a new screenshot because if you're paying attention in the last 2 weeks or so, Merlin updated and it has a new fun interface where you get to see a daily bird. And Merlin is a really fantastic app that helps you identify birds in 4 ways. Through answering 5 simple questions in the step-by-step ID, photo ID. If you're able to snap a photo on your phone, it uses computer visioning to help you figure out what you're looking at. Sound ID, like Shazam for birds, and then the Explore Birds function. And I'm not going to go too much into depth in Merlin because on our last webinar, I did a whole demo. So if you're interested in that, that's on our YouTube channel, which you'll get a link to in the follow-up email. And you can see me demo how to use Merlin. But the one thing I wanted to make sure that you do know how to do, besides these simple questions to help you identify birds, is how to use the Explore Birds function. So Merlin can be a lot like a field guide as well. It'll have pictures, it'll have range maps and songs, and that's what the Explore Bird function is. But you can tailor that to your specific area. So if you click on Explore Birds when you open up Merlin, then you'll get to this section that has this horizontal menu in the right-hand corner. And if you click on that, it's going to bring up this ability to refine your bird list. So it won't look, this is the iPhone screenshot. It won't look like this on Android, but it will be the same menu in the right-hand corner. And it will have somewhere it'll say it's showing you birds by bird pack, and it will be a drop down. And you'll want to select likely birds, filter by your date and location, and then select, I personally like to go by most likely. And that will bring up the list of birds that if you were to walk out your door right today, you would be most likely to observe. And what's also really cool about this is, as an educator, if you are planning ahead for a unit in the future, you can change the date to be that date that you want to do your unit. So if you're planning to do something in June now, you can switch to June and get a tailored list of most likely birds for that time, which then allows you to do cool things like this. Make your own local bird bingo card. So we have this activity written up in a blog, but you use that find your local birds, likely birds, excuse me, feature in Merlin to pick out 9 birds, and then you can have your kids draw those birds in any position they want on a 3x3 grid to create their own bird bingo card, and then get out there and play bird bingo. So it can be a really great first step to identifying birds. Because if we want to have our kids participate in eBird, the participatory science project, they need to be able to identify some local birds. And this is a great way to get that ball rolling. So let's talk a little bit about the lab's, the lab's participatory science projects. They all have a similar way of engaging with them, getting outside, identifying and observing birds, collecting those observations, sharing that data online, and then you can retrieve and view that data as well. So all of those 1.7 billion observations that are in the eBird database, you have access to. You can request to download observations from eBird. And you will always have access to your own data as well. So let's talk about eBird. eBird's motto is every bird counts. So you get outside, you make your observations of whatever you're seeing around you and share those to eBird. eBird really does want every bird. Even if it's an incredibly common bird you see every day, we want to know, because one of our mottos at the lab is keep common birds common. It's a lot easier to protect bird population than it is to bring one back from the brink. To participate in eBird, it's pretty simple. You get outside, you tell us your date and effort. So where you went birding, the time it was, the date, how many people were in your party, whether it was traveling or stationary, and then you tell us what you saw or heard. And you can do that online. So if you're a fan of paper checklists, you can do that online, or you can use the eBird app to do that as well. And then you can share those observations to that database that we talked about. We do have a bunch of resources around eBirds. These 4 here in the color are paid kits, and they are for the classroom. But I did want to bring your attention to, we will be releasing shortly the eBird Explorers Youth Action for Birds, which is an out of school time version of this curriculum, which will be available for free as a download in the near future. We're just working on the final touches on the PDF, and we will be announcing its release in our e-news. So if you haven't joined our e-news, I definitely recommend it. This is chock full of activities, some that we've talked about today, like the sound map, habitat mapping, and help your students learn to identify birds so that they can participate in eBird and ultimately do an action project in their own communities. And it has 3 main goals, from positive youth development to helping students view themselves, or youth view themselves as scientists, and building nature connection through birds. And you can get a kind of little preview of the lessons here. I see a question about available in Spanish. The Explorer's Guidebook is available in Spanish. And then the student facing handouts of this lesson guide will be in Spanish as well. The leader guide will be in English, but the student facing parts will be in Spanish, available in Spanish. All right, that was a quick rundown of some activities and resources for you that can help spark students' connections to birds and nature. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat window. We are at time, so if you need to go, please feel free, but also please feel free to stay in touch with us. If you come up with questions later, you can always reach us at k12lab@cornell.edu. If you would like a letter for one contact hour, a completion letter, you can also email us at k12lab@cornell.edu, and I can send that to you as well. Thank you so much for joining us on this gorgeous June evening. It's our last webinar for the season, but we will be starting up again in September. Hope to see you there. Enjoy your summer.